just like there are people who go and campaign about Badgerys Creek who also argue that Kingsford Smith Airport should be closed. They argue both. People in my area, the No Aircraft Noise Party, for example, and it's the policy of my Greens opponents is that they close the airport and don't open Badgerys Creek either. I think I've always been pretty consistent. I live, if my house was on the Badgerys Creek site, the distance from the runway, I'd still be on the site at Badgerys, like on the airport site, not living outside. That's the distance my home is. And my home is also closer to Badgerys Creek Airport than it is the Badgerys is to Katoomba, for example. So I know every morning, I'm fully aware of the impact of aircraft noise, and I've fought very hard for people and would continue to fight for people from every airport to minimise the impact of the airport. One of the things that I did as Aviation Minister was produce Australia's first white paper on aviation. It changed the way that community consultation happened. So there has to be at all major airports for the first time a community consultation process about the operation of the airport. I changed it so you have every 5 years you have master plans that have to go through an EIS process and go through what the flight paths are part of that every 5 years that an airport's operating. And that was the first time that happened. There were a range of other changes that we made as well. With regard to Badgerys, what we've said there is that during nighttime areas, and I'll make this point, last year there were 4,500 flights at Kingsford Smith Airport between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. during the curfew hours. 4,500. There will not be 4,500 flights from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. at Badgerys Creek while I'm alive, or while my son's alive, probably. That's the truth. 4,500 flights, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. at Kingsford Smith. Both in terms of a shoulder period, whereby if you look up in about a month's time, or it might even be now, QF2 from London lands at 5:15, SQ221 from Singapore lands at 5:10, BA15 lands during that period, and throughout the period there is exemptions for freight. Is mainly what it is, freight flights. There's hospital flights, there's helicopters, medivacs, all that happens. So one of the things I say to people when I get the argument, why is there a curfew at Kingsford Smith but not one at Badgerys Creek? But the truth is there'll be more flights at Kingsford Smith overnight forever into the future than there are at Badgerys.
But why not give us a curfew?
More than there are at ever. Well, you can have a Clayton's curfew. What does it mean? We have 4,500 flights. Yeah. And there will be you do not live. No one here lives to the southwest of the runways where they're pointed. No one here. That is absolutely true. I'm sorry, but it is true.
I used to live there.
That where the runways are pointed towards, and there are people to the south over the bay, by the way, Cornell and all of that. But the truth is that you can have a no-fly zone at Badgerys Creek. over by having Synops, the same things that operate at Kingston Smith Airport between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. You can have that, and we will make sure that that is in place in terms of.
You think it's all right to have a 24-hour airport, or even in your case, do you like being woken up in the middle of the night?
No, because it doesn't. No, just like, hang on. Look, I listened to your question respectfully, and I'm trying to give you an honest and respectful answer. The fact is that the only airports that have a curfew in Australia are ones that are located in the middle of cities. Adelaide, Perth doesn't have one, it's right in the middle of the city, by the way. Adelaide, Sydney, Coolangatta and Essendon. All of the other airports don't have curfews. Now that doesn't mean that they have a whole lot of planes, because the truth is that no one says, I need to go to Melbourne at 3 a.m. in the morning. They just don't. And they don't, the only flights that they have are ones where it's convenient in terms of, because, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, because of time zones. So there are very few flights at night, commercial flights at night. Primarily, the flights at night that operate are freight, and they operate now at Kingston Smith. That's about getting your fresh crabs and seafood and things into Asia at the right time, which is why they operate at that time. So I'm sympathetic, but in terms of where the runways are at Badgerys Creek Airport, or there'll be one runway for a long time, but the second runway will be parallel. You can have, because of the planning controls that were put in place by the Hawke government, you have a large area around that's bigger than my electorate, where there hasn't been development.
No,
Around.
it's been broken. Take them
Well,
to it.
I have been there many times. I'm sorry, I have been there many times, and well, I've been there many times, and in terms of where you can have flights, you can have a no-fly zone. You can also make sure that you minimise impact, which, we have systems in place in Brisbane, in Melbourne, in Sydney, in Perth, in Adelaide. In all of the major airports have to go through that process, but it's certainly a very long way away from Blaxland, Glenbrook. And in terms, well, anyway, look, we're not going to agree. Well, if you think 8 kilometres, you're outside my electorate. There's 120,000 people in between. Well, okay, and well, the national, well, in terms of World Heritage listing, there is no impact of Badgerys Creek, cannot have an impact on World Heritage. And if you go through the way that World Heritage listing works, it will have zero impact on that.
Why does the ICUN listed as a high threat to the World Heritage property?
The fact is that the way that World Heritage listing works is that it will not have an impact on World Heritage. What it will do in terms of Sydney is, like a university does, is in my view, create, and I respect your views, but it will create massive job creation. It will be a very significant catalyst for investment. We're already seeing it with the railway line along the north-south corridor from St Mary's through to the southwest, and it will have a very big impact. And what we need to do with economic activity that occurs, and the truth is there's 2.2 million people live in Western Sydney now. Well, we're not going to agree or disagree, but the fact is that cities have, everywhere in the world, cities have airports. And people now, one of the things that happens as well, is that you've got one that's full, is the problem.
Not true.
60% capacity.
Can I make just one point on that? That Sydney Airport is half the size of Brisbane and a third of the size of Melbourne. One of the problems at Sydney Airport isn't what happens up there, it's what happens on the ground. And anyone who uses Sydney Airport regularly knows that you land and you can't get a gate. The delays at Sydney Airport used to be, when you booked a flight to Melbourne, it used to be an hour and 15 minutes. Then it went to an hour 20, an hour 25, an hour 30, an hour 35, keeps happening. Because it doesn't have the capacity to deal with the demand. And because 4 out of every 10 planes that operate around Australia go through Sydney at some time during the day, a delay at Sydney creates a knock-on effect right around the country. And in terms of our economy and functioning and jobs, it is full. It can't meet the demand of people flying when they want to fly.
Can we get to the, I know, look, we could discuss this